Ms. Haugen, I'd like to start with you, please. You were a lead product manager at the Civic Misinformation Department at Facebook, or Civic Integrity, as it's sometimes called. I want you to help us understand what standards are used to decide what is misinformation and what isn't. And I know that could be an hour-long answer, if we could do a short one.
So just for clarification, people have sometimes said that my team took down, I think, the Hunter Biden story. There are two teams at Facebook, or more than two teams, that deal with misinformation. So the main misinformation team, which was under Community Integrity, uses third-party fact-checkers, which are independent journalists who identify they're allowed to make any choice they want to within the queue of stories, and then they write their own journalism, and that is how things are decided to be true or false. My team worked on...
Do you guys see any problem with outsourcing the fact-checking to people who really don't check facts, but instead check opinions? I mean, I'm a victim of that many times by these so-called journalists who are so-called fact-checkers. Is there any concern about that at Facebook?
It is a very complicated and nuanced issue. I did not work on the third-party fact-checking program, though, so I am not aware of all.
But that's one standard. So any other principles that we might point to that are that would lead us to understanding what the standard is of what is misinformation, what is
Facebook's policy is very clear. They are not the arbiters of truth. So I think there is an open opportunity for public discussion on how third-party fact checks should be conducted, but that is outside the scope of the things that I worked on.
Okay. Mr. Robinson, in your testimony, you say that we must take racism head-on, finally eliminate the racially ignorant, exploitative, and harmful components of big tech. And we would do so by supporting legislation that removes liability if they do not remove content that causes irreparable harm. Now, in principle, I already have objections to that just because it's too vague, but that's not actually what I want you to address. I want you to address of whether it would be really applied neutrally across the board, that general principle of that irreparable harm.
Well, I don't know if we can absolutely get to neutrality, but we don't get to consequences when companies have blanket immunity. And right now, these companies have blanket immunity. And so as a result, we don't allow regulators, enforcers, judges, and juries to be able to...
I'm more asking about the intent of your proposals as opposed to...
The intent of our proposals is to stop allowing Silicon Valley companies to skirt civil rights and to stop allowing them to be able to decide when and where civil rights are enforced.
Right. I mean, on the one hand, I am sympathetic to it because I hate racism. And we recently had 6 people die in Wisconsin, possibly because of racism, because of posts that were on Facebook. 2015, racist posts, violent posts, 2020 again, and now 6 people are dead. Would these proposals address that as well?
The proposals would remove the profit and growth incentive over safety, integrity, and security. And so it places a set of consequences on these platforms and then gets us to a place where there's actually consequences. Right now, there are not consequences. They can come here and lie to you about transparency. They can come here and lie to you what they're doing to keep these companies safe, and you all have no recourse.
I understand.
This has been happening for years.
I understand. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. I appreciate your answers, and I just want to say a few things. One of the concerns we have is that it seems the advocates of censorship or content management or whatever we want to call it, they tend to want to censor in only one direction. They don't want to be neutral in their application of community standards. Second, brings to light this fundamental question: whose fault is it that human beings are horrible to one another? Whose fault is it that a bad person spreads lies or hate? Is it the medium of communication, or is it the person spreading it? This is a very fundamental question, because free speech is very messy. Our founders knew that when they wrote the First Amendment. It can result in all sorts of chaos and pain and hurt feelings because the human race is indeed what it is. But let's be clear, that's a heck of a lot better than the alternative. This independent oversight committee being discussed with an elite, unaccountable few regulating what we see and what we don't. I don't want us to go down that path. And I want to be clear about something else. Republicans and Democrats do not agree on this issue. I've observed a clever strategy by the media and some of my colleagues implying that we all agree, that we're all moving in the right direction towards the same thing. We're all mad at big tech. This is not really true. We have very different views of the problem, and as the ranking member pointed out, one of the bills being considered today puts companies on the hook for any content that causes severe emotional injury, which remains undefined and open to interpretation. It's fundamentally un-American that your hurt feelings should dictate my free speech. And I think the Democrat Party wants to censorship wants to censor based on vague interpretations of harmful speech and misinformation, which invariably means things they just disagree with. They can't legally infringe on the First Amendment, so bully big tech into doing it for you.
Gentleman's time
Can't
has
go down
expired.
this path. Thank you.